Welcome to this week's episode of the Brownie Points Podcast. For our first segment, we are covering the Browns' dominant win over the New York Jets, our big takeaway from that game. Following that, we're going to have our Brownie Points segment, which is basically our award segment. We're going to give awards to the standout players on offense and to the standout players on defense. Following that will be our storyline of the week segment. This week, the Browns have kind of a meaningless game coming up against the Bengals. Should we play our starters? How much should they play? And then we'll round out our episode with our look-ahead segment covering that Browns game versus the Bengals. Levi, let's get us started off with the Browns' dominant win over the Jets. What's your big takeaway from that game?
No, it's my big takeaway from this game. I love the fact that this team is consistent. When you look around, I know the Browns haven't had this so much because the Browns typically have been, kind of outside looking in, just hoping for big moments. But when you look at teams like the Bills and other teams, honestly, throughout the years who have had big moments, and then you see they'll step up to them, but then they'll fall flat on their face when they're in the easy game, but games that are still necessary and needed. And quite frankly, you'll see teams like the Eagles this year who are just falling apart, just lost to the Cardinals. I don't know what kind of mess they are. Teams sometimes do really well when they're the team on top and they can't deal with a loss, or they deal very well when they're the team that nobody looks at, but they don't deal well when everybody knows who they are. The Browns seemingly all of a sudden have been able to do both. When we all thought that the season was over, they came in there and they killed it and they stayed consistent and we were really proud of them. And then they showed up in big moments. And we were really proud of them. And now here they come in on primetime football. Right after a huge win, everybody's talking about Joe Flacco. He's on all the shows. Everybody's, oh my God, he's going to get comeback player of the year. I don't know about that, but he's playing phenomenal. This is crazy. He's this old guy. He's playing the Browns. The Browns are playing phenomenal. All this good stuff, right? And then they're playing primetime. Now that is a big moment and a classic example of when teams often flop and just put up a stinker. And even if they win, it's just way closer than it should be, and it totally takes the air out of the room. Didn't do that. Instead, they came out and they won convincingly, and they took it to them, and they made sure that the game wasn't really in doubt. That is extremely important, and it speaks to more than just being on top of your games and not letting games get away from you, because that is extremely important, because suddenly games start getting away from you and then you think you're going to get it back when you need to, but then all of a sudden you don't and the momentum's out of hand. But it's also important because it's a tell of a well-coached team that has the correct mindset week in and week out, and that is extremely important come playoff time. So I'm very happy right now. I feel great, and I feel great because it doesn't just feel like a team. It feels like a well-led team and a well-coached team and a team that mentally is prepared for the challenges ahead.
Yeah, absolutely. Just like you said, before the season started, we polled, we did it on Twitter, we did it in the podcast, and we had a segment about it. Is this a make or break year for Kevin Stefanski? We both felt like it was. The general fan base felt like it was. And boy, did he make it. Kevin Stefanski has shown, without a doubt, he is the guy going forward. No matter what happens, I think now in the Bengals game in the playoffs. And I think you have to kind of give him a pass most likely just because of all the injuries, when teams will have more time to game plan for you. I think even if they lose that first game in the playoffs, it's going to be hard to hold that against Kevin Stefanski. Kevin Stefanski, I think, has solidified his case. He is the guy going forward. The Browns' incredible ability to overcome injury after injury after injury after. I don't recall a season in any sport, for as a Browns fan, I mean, on our teams. I can't speak to other teams. But for our teams, I can't recall a time ever where every single week we get news of a major, significant player, usually a starter, that's going to be out for the next game, for the rest of the season. I've never seen it before. Starting quarterback, backup quarterback. We're starting a quarterback we picked up off the couch. We're missing our starting running back, our starting right tackle, our backup right tackle, our starting left tackle. It's our safeties, the corners in and out, linebackers, defensive tackle, Maurice Hurst out for the season. It's just all over the place, and it's endless. And Kevin Stefanski's ability for this team to stay focused, to stay strong, it's like they barely even miss a beat. And the thing is, this Jets pass defense is a top 5 ranked pass defense in the league, if I recall correctly. I know last week they were top 3, things can move around a little bit, but they were a top ranked pass defense, and that didn't seem to matter in that first half. Even without Amari Cooper, and without Elijah Moore, right? It was second half. Yeah. But it's baffling. It's hard to wrap your head around the amount of adversity that this team has overcome. In the past Browns, you could hand deliver a win, and they'd find a way to fumble it. You could pick up the win, put it in their hands, wrap their arms around it, and then they just drop it. That was the Browns of old. This Browns team, I've never seen anything like it from the Browns. It's a weird feeling, almost as a Browns fan, where week over week over week, we have all this adversity, and I keep thinking, I was like, well, I think they're going to be okay. I think they're going to figure it out, because they have. And that's something we haven't seen before. That's my big takeaway from that game. And that is just incredible to see as a Browns fan. It's so encouraging, and I'm really, really excited to see how this might translate going into the playoffs. Kevin Stefanski is a pretty good mind. I think he's a pretty good schemer. And I think I'm very curious to see, basically, when we get into these playoffs, like what might happen with him and how he'll do if he has more time to practice. But we're going to get into that next week. We'll have our playoff preview. But for now, let's transition to our Brownie Point segment. Again, it was a dominant win by the Browns over the Jets. It was never really close, so we're going to give it our Brownie Points. So if you're a first-time listener, our Brownie Point segment is where we award Brownie Points, which is our version of awards, to the standout players on offense, to the standout players on defense. The more Brownie Points you get, the better we thought you performed in this game. Levi, get us started with our offensive Brownie Points. Who do you got at 3 Brownie Points? Who are you giving out 2? Who are you giving out 1 Brownie Point?
All right, so starting with 3, I'm going to give it to David Njoku. He's obviously had a phenomenal season. He's closing in on 900 yards. He's got about 845, I do believe. He had 116 yards in the first quarter, and then he wasn't really targeted after that. But he had that many in the first quarter. I mean, he was just phenomenal all game. He blew it up. He did have that one fumble, which definitely hurts, and it's a little frustrating. Again, he reminds me a lot of Mike Evans. He's a guy who just blows up all the time. He's super athletic, but occasionally just makes your head scratch. But he does enough good that you still feel great about him. And it's been nice to see him fully utilized, because I've felt for a long time like this guy has a tremendous amount of potential. We really need to be utilizing him more, and it's good to finally see that happening. He's really talented, and he showed it. And, you know, it's not just him catching the ball. It's the yak. It's the yards after catch. He gets it with room to run, and he runs. He gallops his way downfield. He ends plays putting more on it, and it shows. And he's just good. And I don't know what to tell you. I mean, he's a major mismatch. And finally utilizing him is really helpful. I think it's a big reason why. It is a big reason why we were able to have a lot of success against this pass defense with Cooper out. The reason why that still works is because you have a mismatch of Njoku's caliber. And we've watched these great tight ends create mismatches for years. And the Browns had this guy and didn't utilize him. Now creates a mismatch. It makes the defense adjust, and then it creates all kinds of problems, because then they have to over-adjust, and then they're taking the safety out of it. Well, to take the safety out of it, you don't have the double coverage you need. You got Cooper burning you up. So I'm really happy to see this happening, because number one, I personally like Njoku, but number two, he just creates a whole new dynamic for the team. 2 Brownie Points, great performance, very close to giving him 3, but ultimately 2 I will give to Joe Flacco. Reason being, because he did throw the interception, Njoku had the fumble, but then he was a little dead in the second half. He did a phenomenal first half, 296 and all, but he did die in the second half, and there was a little later in the game when we really did need a first down or two, and he just airmailed it over the running back coming out of the backfield, and it's a little nitpicky, you could say, and it's fair, but overall, you got to give somebody 3 and somebody 2 in 2 great performances, and so I'm going to give Njoku 3 and 2 to Joe Flacco. But hey, keeping an eye on you, Joe. We appreciate everything you're doing. It's cool. And I will say I basically consider it 1 interception. I know there was a second one, but it was like a 4th down. You had to throw it. Throw it deep and go for it. You might as well. I don't really count that against him, even though, of course, it goes on the stat sheet. Lastly, 1 goes to Jerome Ford. Nice bounce back game. You hadn't really seen him have a big game in a while, but over 120 yards from the line of scrimmage, 2 receiving touchdowns. He fought for those touchdowns, again showing he does have a nose for the end zone, which is awesome. Doesn't give up on plays, found ways to get in, backed his way through defenders. Love to see that kind of aggression and just finishing off those runs. And it's great to see that bounce back before we go into the playoffs to have him get his confidence back up and running. Who do you think were your offensive best performances of the game?
Well, I'm in complete agreement with you. I have those same 3 guys. I also consider maybe Joe Flacco should be at 3, and Njoku at 2. Ultimately, I want to give it to Njoku at 3 as well. He did have that fumble, but it was such an incredible game from him. We have the same Brownie Points. I don't want to go over the same things as you did, but great game from David Njoku. Great first half from Joe Flacco. Would have liked to have seen a little bit more in the second half, but overall they did everything they needed to do in the first half, and so the fact that the second half wasn't as good didn't really matter that much. And so at the end of the day, when you're looking at it, the whole game, evaluating the whole thing, it was great from him. Jerome Ford, again, really a nice game. He's such a solid running back. I don't think he really is, elite like Nick Chubb was. I think that's clear, but he is such a solid running back. He's really underrated in the receiving game. He's pretty underrated. He can break through tackles. He's got a little bit of burst in him. I'm really excited for him. I really like that going forward with him pairing with Nick Chubb. Could be really nice. I think they'll probably work as a tandem back in the future. So that's going to be really exciting. But another good game from Jerome Ford. One more thing about David Njoku. First time in my life, I think this is the most consistent production I've ever seen from David Njoku, I believe. In the past, we've often seen a great game followed up by nothing, or maybe even back-to-back followed up by nothing. This is the first time where week after week after week, he's been an incredible performer, and like you said, a mismatch, and he's shown that mismatch that he brings every single game. And his yards after the catch is incredible. He's one of the best, maybe the second best yards after the catch tight end in the league. He's so good. His speed and his strength and his athleticism pops when he has that ball in his hands and he's got open field. But that was awesome for him to see. Let's talk about the defense a little bit.
I mean, if you include health, George Kittle becomes a question.
Yeah, George Kittle, yeah.
He's almost never healthy, though.
Yeah, exactly. So, who knows. But let's talk about the defenders in this game. Who are the standout players on defense for you? Who do you want to give your brownie points to?
Yeah, so looking at the defense, number one, 3 brownie points. The man is a gem coming from nowhere all the way into our secondary and into our hearts. Ronnie Hickman from the OH to the BR? I don't know. To the CLE?
CLE.
Yeah, that's better. OH to the CE?
Yeah, don't worry about it. Yeah.
Yeah, that guy, Ronnie Hickman. But seriously, undrafted free agent. Got to give credit to Andrew Berry. Appreciate, those undrafted free agents. Sometimes they don't work. Most of the time they don't work. But paying attention to a 53-man roster. It's not a 48-man roster. It's not a 35-man roster. It is a 53-man roster. And the reason why it's a 53-man roster, the reason why every single spot on that practice squad matters is Ronnie Hickman. Ronnie freaking Hickman, who is our starting safety, pick 6 in primetime in a big moment, has another good game. It's not one big game. He's been good. Genuinely. I mean, I'm considering him to be a starting safety. I mean, we'll have to see over the course of a season. But how's that for an undrafted free agent? When you get your moments, you got to step up, and he has stepped up in a big way. He's a rookie. He's playing really well for a rookie, period. Forget about the fact that he's undrafted. And it's just a bonus that he's a Buckeye. Finally, we get our Buckeye we can root for, right? It feels good. So, I mean, we got Denzel Ward, too, to be fair. So, I guess it's a Buckeye secondary then. But Ronnie Hickman, but again, he's that walk-on. He's undrafted. That's just a little something more to root for. He's the underdog. In Cleveland, we love rooting for the underdog. So how great is it to see Ronnie Hickman? It's phenomenal. 3 brownie points. Super excited to see him on this team moving forward. And especially considering how cheap his contract is for the next few years. Moving on, 2 brownie points. JOK, continuing his resurgent season. We're going to have to worry about his contract at some point, but he's been really nice. Now that we have better defensive tackles, he's able to do what he does, which is shooting gaps and making big plays. He had another big tackle for last night, catching Breece Hall in the backfield for a 4-yard loss, which, side note, Breece Hall, man, do you lose 220 pounds? And he took him out. JOK came right in there and took him out immediately. No help, just clean him out in the backfield. That's hard to do. So that was phenomenal to see. He did have one bad angle, we'll say, in the game, but for the most part, he's good. He's been really nice. He's had some moments where you've been able to put him in certain places and shut down certain parts of the opponent's game, which is really nice. Did a great job earlier in the year against Lamar, shutting him down in the running game, which is huge, obviously. And yeah, he had a couple big plays, showed yet again how he's really improved, and he's been a lot of fun to watch. One brownie point will be Myles Garrett. I'm really happy about him, and maybe it's a little case of you got tired of talking about the best players, so I will admit maybe it's a little bit of that MVP-ism where, MVPs seem to go around more than they should because sometimes you just don't want to give it to the same guy year after year. But I do at least want to give him recognition. He did have a sack. He broke his drought. He was causing pressures all game. Even got a holding call, lo and behold. He looked good. Welcome back, Myles Garrett, to the sack lineup. Those are my top performers. Who are your top performers for the defense this past Thursday night?
Once again, I'm in complete agreement with you on the standout players on defense, so I don't want to gloss over too much. Not gloss over. I don't want to go over all, rehash all the same points. But yeah, I do want to say for Myles Garrett, he had a really underrated game. Yes, he got back on the stat sheet as far as sacks go, but there's this whole thing going on right now with TJ Watt fans, and they're always comparing their sacks. And I'm not watching every game from TJ Watt. I'm not watching the TJ Watt film like we're watching Myles Garrett. And yes, we are a little bit biased, but Myles Garrett's effect does go deeper than the numbers. When you watch that game, Myles Garrett was consistently beating his man at the line of scrimmage and forcing the ball out earlier from Trevor Siemian. There were play after play after play where Trevor had to get rid of that ball because he knew Myles Garrett was coming. And maybe it doesn't register as a hurry because it happens too quickly. Like he sees him, he feels him coming off, he beats his man, boom, releases the ball, gets rid of it. Some of them did register as QB hurries, but Myles Garrett is beating his man with such consistency at the line of scrimmage. It's incredible, and I do think he's showing that he maybe is actually the most dominant defensive lineman at the line of scrimmage, even better than TJ Watt, in my personal opinion. And maybe part of that is I'm extra juiced up because of all the TJ Watt fans coming out, so you got to defend your guy. But Myles Garrett's effect does go a little bit deeper than the numbers, and it's really important to talk about that. And yes, we probably have a little bit of that MVP-ism, as you said, where maybe he did deserve 2 brownie points or whatever, but we want to make sure he at least gets his recognition, and we do want to give a chance to talk about other people and give them shout-outs when they deserved it, and JOK and Ronnie Hickman certainly did deserve that, especially Ronnie Hickman. Absolutely incredible to be seeing an undrafted rookie performing like this. We'll see what he can do in the future as our starting safeties come back from injuries. We'll see what happens and where he fits in the lineup, but having a guy like him in the roster on a cheap contract, always beneficial, especially for this team which just gets injuries after injuries every single week. All right, let's transition into our storyline of the week segment. The Browns clinched the playoffs against the Jets. Awesome. Love it. Which means a rare, really, really rare situation for the Cleveland Browns. Next week is a meaningless game. The Browns have clinched their spot. I don't believe there's any movement. I believe
the best way.
They are locked in the best spot. Yeah, in the best way. Usually there's like, well, which draft position are we locked into? No. This is the playoffs we're talking about here. But the Browns, I believe they're locked into that 5th seed. We're going to play the winner of, I don't remember the name, the Jags. Probably going to be the Jags, but we'll see what happens. But the Browns are locked in there. The next week against the Bengals is meaningless. It's kind of meaningless for the Bengals as well. And you have this question of who should start? Should you play your starters? And if you play your starters, how much should you play those starters? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I definitely think we should rest a few people. Maybe throw Joe Flacco out for a series or two if you're worried about rust. I mean, that's something to consider. But you do want to mostly give him a rest. At the end of the day, he's been the ageless wonder, and we're all proud of him, but he's about to be 39 still. He hasn't played in a while. Having a rest is just a huge advantage. And having him, again, you know what? He still only knows part of the playbook, so he doesn't have the whole playbook in his head. So getting the extra week of prep where he just has one play set to do for the Bengals, and the rest is just prepping for the next week, getting ready for it, getting a few plays of those trick plays, those things that you want to do for the playoffs under wraps during that week, and then the more specific game prep leading up to the week. So you get that extra time for him and the rest, which he probably needs. As much as we'd like him, he is almost 39. I think you definitely don't want to start your starting safeties. Newsome and Ward have had some injury issues in the past. Let's rest them. These guys are super critical because his defense, a lot of what makes or breaks his defense is those two corners being healthy. EJ Emerson cannot handle fast receivers. Oh, I'm sorry, MJ Emerson. Emerson can't handle fast receivers. He's great with the physical, but those really fast guys, when they have a nice strong two like a Jalen Waddle, and if he comes back and we have to face the Dolphins, you want that. You want both those corners to be healthy. Let's not risk it over a stupid game that doesn't matter. Let's just see Ronnie Hickman play more. He is a rookie, so I would say keep playing him. Let's see what he's got. Maybe take him out after halftime, but let's not go overboard with it. But yeah, I don't want to see Garrett. Let's give Garrett a rest break. He doesn't need the extra playing time. Let's probably pull Zadarius Smith. Let's not rush him back. And he's had some injury. Let's let him sit for the week. Let's not rush back Amari Cooper. There's no reason to bring back Cooper. No reason to rush back Elijah Moore. Let's get some reps. And, I know we haven't seen him all year, but I'd love to see some Austin Watkins. Let's give my boy some playing time. But honestly, I think it would be the right thing to do for a guy who, is trying to fight for spots on rosters most years. Give him a shot to show what he can do. He had such a great preseason for you. Give him a shot. And you might as well. And you know what? He's on your roster. And you had some injuries at receiver. You might end up needing him as much as we hope you don't. You might. It doesn't hurt to get some reps in. So those guys out there, but mostly Cedric Tillman. Let's see a lot more reps for Cedric Tillman. He seems to be a guy we kind of want to get involved as that third receiver. So let's get Cedric Tillman more involved. If there is an injury to Moore, that he can be involved. Maybe some more for David Bell, that kind of thing. So definitely want to put more on that. Might want to pull in Njoku too. Let's get Harrison Bryant some reps. Not like he's not good anyway. So let's do that for sure. I'm all about that. Let's give some reps, rest of the starters. I would say maybe keep the offense in for a drive or two, just to, just kind of like the preseason. You give them a little bit just so they don't rust out on you. But definitely take the huge opportunity to get a bye week here.
Yeah, like the Browns are an injury-riddled team, like all season. That's what we've been talking about. It's like the big thing about the Browns is we have so many injuries and they've overcome them. But this is our chance. This is our chance. Rest as many guys as you can. Now, it's not like in the NBA, for example, you can do this to a more extreme degree because there's 15 guys in a roster. So you can sit your entire starting five and just play the other 10 guys, and that'll cover everything. The NFL, there's 53 spots, but there's 22 starting lineups. Like, you can't really just sit every single starter and then only play the bad guys for the whole game. It just doesn't really work like that. So you can pick and choose. You can pick your guys who you think you want to sit out for the entire game. But for the most part, you got to play guys like a little bit. So I think that's the approach we should take. Definitely that preseason approach. Joe Flacco, I think a drive or two, sit him. As far as the running back room goes, I want Jerome Ford and Kareem Hunt to take a serious back role, and I want Peter Strong to take the lead back role and take 80% of the carries is what I like to see. From the offensive line, I would like it. You got to be careful with the offensive line because if you lead them, a poor offensive line leads to injuries in other ways often, to your quarterbacks and to your running backs. But if possible, try to give those guys as much rest as you can get them. From the receivers, I don't want to see Amari Cooper playing at all and Elijah Moore at all. I would probably normally say maybe a drive or two from them, but just because of their injuries, just let them sit the whole game. We do have other receivers that can come in and that can play. Can they play well? Who knows? We'll see, but that's why we can utilize this game, right? See what we have from some guys. So I don't want to see Amari Cooper and I don't want to see Elijah Moore play at all. I would also like to see Denzel Ward sit for probably the entire game, to be completely honest. He's also a guy that is a little bit injury prone. He's been dealing with injuries again this year. Just let him sit. Just please take advantage of this. Let him sit. Don't let him play. Greg, probably I would like to see him play a little bit, maybe like a quarter or two, and then out, but also try to keep it to a minimum. Ronnie Hickman, I think because he's newer to the team and because he's an undrafted rookie and I think all this experience I think is really important for him. I think he's the kind of guy you probably want to play for 3 quarters, maybe just take him out for the 4th quarter. But I think you want to still, even though he's a starter, I think you do want to try to give him as many minutes as you can from the defensive line. I think
he hasn't played all year, so you don't have to worry as much about the wear and tear for Ronnie.
Yeah, exactly. I want to see Myles Garrett, Dalvin Tomlinson, and Zadarius Smith take a massive step back. I want to see Alex Wright take a forefront role position in that game. JOK, all these guys, they need to take a huge step back, take the preseason approach. The starters in total, I think the only starter on this team, the starters from last week, right, that should play more than a quarter, definitely not more than 2, it should definitely more than 2 quarters, I think is Ronnie Hickman. After that, I don't want to see anybody playing more than 2 quarters, and most of the starters, I think, should really only play 1 quarter's worth of time. That's what I personally want to see. We'll see what they actually do, and following that, next week, we'll talk about the playoffs and what to come next. But what do you expect from this game against the Bengals, like overall? Like, we talked about the players and who should sit and who should not sit and how much should they play. Okay, we got into that. We got into the nitty-gritty details. But overall, what's your predictions for this game?
Yeah, I do think the Bengals will win. I just think they care more about this game. If it was a full-time, if we cared about this game, if we had a shot to win the division, if the Ravens had lost one of those past 3 games or something, I think it would be a very different story. However, the reality is the Browns, again, I think they're going to rest a bunch of guys. I think they will be playing DTR. I don't think they're going to have the same drive. At the same time, the Bengals do care a little more about this. They're a little disappointed. It could be get a letdown, but at the same time, because they are led by Jake Browning, a guy who's a backup, who, at the end of the day, this is his last big chance before free agency for him. He's a guy who's going to put it all on the line. It's time to show, it's time to shine, to say, hey, maybe I deserve a shot somewhere else or at least a high-end backup role. It's a really big deal. It's really what sets you up for life. It's a big, because he hasn't had it. It's all this rookie, a low round, I think it was 4th or 5th round pick. So a low round rookie contract. It's nice, but it doesn't set you up for life, you and your family. Even if you end high-end backup, if you're getting a $3 or $15 million deal, that can set you up, you and your family up for life. He just has a lot more to fight for. And the team does seem to like him. I think they will fight for him. And so, therefore, I just think they're going to care. He's going to put up a solid enough performance. And, again, I suspect we'll be resting a lot of starters on defense. As such, I do think most likely it will probably end up being like 27-14. I think they'll get a pretty big win because I just don't think we're going to try that hard. The only difference is if in those first 2 drives we're really successful. But otherwise, I think it'll end up somewhere in that range just due to that. And side note, keep an eye on that Texans-Colts game. We're rooting for the Colts. You don't want to see the Texans in the playoffs. They might fall flat and everything, but they just feel very dangerous. Maybe not the best team, but a dangerous team. Jaguars don't feel that dangerous. The Texans with CJ Stroud back feel dangerous.
Yeah, I mean, we'll see. Like you said, like this week, it's just kind of meaningless. You get the feeling like the Bengals are probably going to win this game. They're the only ones who have any stake in this game. No, they don't have playoff stakes. They don't have seeding stakes, but they have pride stakes in this game, and that does matter. They have pride stakes in this game. The Browns have no stakes. They don't have pride stakes. They already made the playoffs. They don't care. They lose this game, it doesn't do anything to their pride. It doesn't do anything to their ego. All they care about is like, we made the playoffs, let's get into this healthy. That's all they care about. The Bengals actually have some motivation in this game. So I do feel like the Bengals are going to win. The Browns are probably going to be sitting a lot of their starters. The Bengals might not be. They don't have as much, obviously, to gain by doing something like that. They have more to gain by trying to get some momentum before they end the season. The Bengals are a fairly talented team. They just have also had injuries. They just haven't been able to overcome them like the Browns have. Oh, well. I guess their coach isn't as good. But the Bengals have some motivation. The Browns don't. It's as simple as that. I think the Browns are likely to score a touchdown on that first drive with Joe Flacco. They do that pretty consistently, so they're probably going to get that touchdown, which gets them to 7. They'll probably get like a field goal, maybe 2, when the backups and everything come in. I see them scoring 10 to 13 points, and I think the Bengals are generally going to be playing against, again, a not very motivated defense, a defense that's going to be sitting a lot of their starters, and a lot of our starters were out to begin with, so they're going to be playing against third stringers, a lot of practice squad guys, most likely, I hope. But assuming that is the case, I think the Bengals are going to be able to move. I think they're probably going to score about 24 points. So I see this game finishing about 24-10, 24-13, but we don't really care. We're already in the playoffs, so it's a great feeling as a Browns fan. I mean, how rare is it do we get to watch games with no consequences? We get to just watch the game, hey, let's just see what the guys do, and who cares? We're in the playoffs no matter what. So it's a really exciting time to be a Browns fan. I can't wait for next week and for us to start prepping for the playoffs.
And we'll look forward to seeing you next week, where we will be discussing the P word, the playoffs.